Welcome back to the AI Ripple Effect podcast. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Allison Ullrich, principal and founder of Potentiate OS. Allison, it's a real pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Well, thank you, Jonny. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm flattered and really looking forward to speaking with you today. So back to you.
Fantastic. Great. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, and then we can dive into Potentiate OS and have a look at what you do there and who your customers are.
Sure. So for about the last 20 years, I've been really fortunate to have a pretty broad generalist background, which I feel has given me a lot of great, strong opportunities to then navigate deeper into the niche of operations, manufacturing, and supply chain. My undergrad's in advertising marketing, and I did that for a few years. Transitioned into a large Fortune 500 CPG doing grassroots marketing. And then I switched into working for a gases and chemicals company for 10 years. I started in sales, doing very high value clients that were 6, 7, 8-figure, like long-term agreements in biotech, pharma, and healthcare. And, when you have a sales mindset, it is important to sign them. But these were clients, entities where price wasn't the problem. It was about service. And when you think about putting together a deal like that, it's a big breadwinner. It's a big part of your paycheck, and you don't want to lose that. And so for me, it's always been this curiosity to learn more and understand more and go deeper. And I didn't want to be responsible for losing that. And it's also never for me about ball tossing. It's always teamwork. So I then would sign these large commodity accounts, and I spent time out on the manufacturing floor, like where the gases and chemicals were produced. I'd get on the truck with the guys, and I'd see a lot of my clients. And that's where I evolved then really deep into manufacturing and operations. I was fortunate to grow up in a family that does plastics manufacturing too. So that just really gave me this broad brush stroke of how important all of the components are to create a really strong flywheel. Every department and person is critical, and you need to respect them. And from working, at that firm for 10 years, I moved up into management and leadership. And I realized I was being held back basically by people who, when we get older, it was the dilemma of how much risk they wanted to take versus the reward for shareholders, for profitability. And I just hit this point of it was really wonderful, and it wasn't self-serving me anymore. So I stepped out, transitioned into startup, and then I would help founders and their brands grow, developing teams, manufacturing processes end to end, working with customer service, doing everything from a tech standpoint, really nitty gritty like a lot of people do at startups. And so I popped around and I did that. And I just found myself constantly, while working for a brand and founders, growing teams, I want to provide individuals with that opportunity to learn. I want them to jump off the branch and go find a promotion. If it means you leave the company, go do it. And I think also it comes down to when I would work with other brands on the side, the founders would allow me to network with other people to give them some pro tips per se. And that's what led me to realize I love doing this, but I love more so helping people and brands. And then that gives me the opportunity to fade to black and keep finding opportunities to transition into. So that's what led me to leave getting a paycheck from a firm about 2 years ago, and then going into Potentiate.
Wow. Well, congratulations on that. I think that sounds exactly the right mix of expertise to make it a success. So
Mhm.
let's go into Potentiate.
Mhm.
And as a consultant working with leaders in supply chain and logistics, what are you seeing as the trends and themes right now?
Yeah. So my firm, I focus on two personas. I focus on the brand and the founders, making certain I'm helping them as they're growing and scaling. The second persona that I focus on for my core group are the elite operators, the men and women who work at firms and entities that have a lot of great experience, like in a very niche area of supply chain and operations, or also they're very broad brushstroke as well too. And they're looking for opportunities to grow above and beyond and scale their intelligence and experiences into more senior roles. A lot of these people get stuck in the bottleneck. So when we think about the bottleneck of these elite operators, and then basically the bottleneck that founders get into, it's the paradigm of getting out of your way to see what types of frameworks and opportunities exist out there that you need to really push forward and get over the fear of doing something different. And so what I find to be going on in the marketplace right now between those two personas is it's about scaling efficiently and correctly, because it's about culture. It's about success and profitability and how well educated everybody across your entire organization is on supply chain. And then we also see how important in regards to what you all focus on is AI. It is a really huge, of course, growing trend about how people utilize it. But do you really need to do something slick and super expensive? And so that's where I talk with founders, and I work with the operators too, that I'm helping them in developing their career at the executive level. Is it's about working smarter and not harder. And typically that also means there are really great advancements in AI that come at a low or no cost. And that's the best place to start. And that's where I also look at it outside the scope of AI, how simple it is to find, ways to solve, very standard problems so they can move forward and make process and progress happen.
Fantastic. That's a great sort of way of leaning into the subject of AI, which is of course, and I was really interested in one. I think it was in one of your excellent newsletters where you said that leaders are lunging at AI as their savior,
Mhm.
only to join the 60% of companies that have already learned the hard truth that bolting AI onto broken processes isn't transformation. I thought that was really insightful.
Yeah.
Love to go into that a little bit more if you can expand on that.
Sure. I think prior to AI, there's a lot of wonderful established and up and coming cloud-based, SaaS-based programs for any industry, right? And when we are in the startup ecosystem environment, you're looking for, the next big thing to fix or solve for your customers, your members, but also internally too. And it's that shiny object syndrome. Before it was how much can I build in Google with macros and advanced formulas that connect to like 35 spreadsheets, right? And that's a great way to problem solve because you teach your teams to be nimble and scrappy, which is super important in startup. But it also becomes the fact that you keep bolting on all of these systems and solutions where you're not spending enough time to go deep to really understand all the benefits versus what you're paying for. And then they get abandoned. People attrit, right? And so coming back to AI, the way, again, it's very similar to how people are looking at some of these firms that come out with wonderful names and logos. They are the people that have left and exited X, Y, and Z company, and they have millions and billions of funding now. Everybody keeps jumping and shifting from one AI solution to another for the same reason, which is they're looking to see how fast it could fix on the surface level. Because again, the biggest thing for me that I've always been spoken about is like slowing down in order to speed up. And so the way in which these companies are looking at the options is one, you don't need to buy some super expensive, sexy AI platform. You don't. There's a lot out there, like I said before, that is like low or no cost. And that's the best way to actually understand what works for you and your organization, for your team. How fast are they able to learn in relation to still getting their regular day-to-day work done? And then it's, again, AI. People get this fear of AI is going to take my job. Well, I think we know this now, that there are certain roles that AI should take over. But then that's supposed to push us as human beings to work smarter and harder. And that means we should have greater just intrinsic motivation to push ourselves, I think. And that's more of a higher philosophical thing. But the way I summed it up on a podcast I was on in like March or April is it really comes down to starting simple, and really trying to do more of a straw man on what systems work versus how fast people were able to get their day-to-day work done, but then not work till 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, learning how AI can help build some of the other passion projects that are mission critical to the company. So that's where you just have to really sift and sort through the dilemmas and stay very, very focused.
I think that's super interesting, that comes between AI for bringing in AI for efficiency with the sort of the need for human judgment. And I think you've used the example of IKEA where the point about education
Mhm.
as a great example where they really invested in training up their staff to work more efficiently with AI, not see it as a threat to their jobs. So I think that was super interesting. How are
Yeah.
you finding your clients in terms of that balance between bringing in new technology and the human element
Mhm.
to it?
I'm finding that people in general, at the founder level, they still get that shiny object syndrome. But I think people are now more apt to realizing how fast AI is developing by the hour, by the day and week. It's very substantial. And then there's also really more of the safety and security parameters, again, too, that is requiring them to realize, I know I need this, but I'm not really certain which way to go. Like, I don't know what area to paint on the canvas for it first. And I think that's a pretty big revelation for founders. They know they need to do it and they just want to go in and, of course, be bull in the china shop to get it done. But on that side of the house, it's more about slowing down. And I ask them, what is it that you want whatever AI platform you pick to actually do or solve? Because it's not just about solving member or customer problems. It's about solving internal customer problems too, to again, help people work smarter and easier without pressure and feel that there is a culture that supports them to be there as employees. And so like understand and learn how to use AI. You want to put that out to your teams so they are indoctrinated and they learn and understand how they can be like the Tiger team lead on finding out how to solve challenging project that the organization has had in supply chain that Excel or Google Sheets hasn't been able to do, right? In tandem with some of your vendors. So that's the founder side. And I think on the operator side, the biggest piece is everybody just wants to be able to AI is so fascinating and it's truly educational and experiential that it's this wonderful, overwhelming component in a job where you can really go deep and to learn, right? And you train it. And this is again where it's low or no cost. And what I tell some of my operator clients at the individual level is if you're in charge of the team and you have a little bit of like free space from leadership, you need to help educate your team on what platform and how they need to use it. So they realize AI is only going to be as beneficial, as intelligent, and as focused as you are to figure out how to use it. No, it is a user by user case if you don't have large language models built into the back of your organization and you haven't subscribed to an AI client so far. And then I also tell them it's important for them to figure out how to implement it with how they're looking at opportunities, work with clients, work with vendors, work with some of their partnerships as well too, to understand what are some of the components with some of the current SaaS or cloud-based programs that your company is running. So you can do some straw man models as well to understand, I don't have to do everything in AI, but if I do it in AI first before we plug it into one or two of the platforms that we use every day, that's where it comes in handy. So it's allowing them to then operate at a leadership level, like on the path and, on the train with the organization, while also understanding how to dip and dive into those opportunities that exist. So they are also leveling themselves up too.
Super interesting. And how are you investing in your own AI journey as well, from an education and also from a use
Oh,
perspective as well? I mean, you're a growing business. How are you utilizing the technology?
absolutely. I too get shiny object syndrome. I think when you are an audience of one running a firm like I am, it's one of those daunting opportunities that I thought I always wanted to do. And then when you dive into it and you're in it, you have to literally wear every hat: finance, marketing, sales, consulting, all the components. And at first I aimed to not implement AI at first so I could just really learn for me each one of those lanes. And yes, I understand how to do all of that from my prior experience with organizations and startups. But when you're on your own, you don't have that structure. You don't have that org chart built out. It's you. So I was like, I got to get this on paper, one. And then I figured out where I was spending so much of my time physically and mentally. It's really wonderful for me personally to be mentally exhausted at the end of a day or a week. And I had to take a step back and realize what parts are really burning me out and they're daunting in a healthy way. And then it was spend time there with understanding what tools exist to help solve that, to make it easier. I'm still, in charge and I'm holding the wheel, but how can I put together systems and schedules and plans? So that's how I did like my initial entry into it. I'm a big fan of using Claude. I love Anthropic. I use the Pro model, and I use that really to, put together, like, again, I give it, I've got some of like my background information in there, like from the cloud, and I allow it to help me to utilize and understand how to better prepare proposals. So again, I'm working smarter. Everything is still very specific and unique to each client on both sides of the house. But to have that built out based off of when you spend the time building out the details, like in the project knowledge base, that's me and my information, right? But instead of me like regurgitating it for the 90th time, I'm still saving probably 30, 40 minutes sometimes, which is a huge help. And then, when it comes to writing, visuals, there are several platforms that I really like to play around with to understand, like, do I want to do this or not? So that's like on the marketing side of the house. But I've kept it pretty simple because I think I've got so much shiny AI objects on the side. I could get distracted, and I got to practice what I preach. And those are things that I tend to like check out on the weekend to understand, are they for fun or is there a way for me to implement in my business?
So you've been going for 24 months, still a very young business. I mean, what
Yeah.
have been the biggest challenges over the last period of time? But also what have been the milestones that have been a catalyst to your growth?
Yeah. I think for me, when, I finished business school and, I love everybody in my cohort, we all had this sense of we were high achievers anyway. And to be, thrown into that environment is what you want. And it's addictive. It's exciting. Like you're going and, it's nonstop. And when we left, it was like such this runner's high that just, dropped right off. And it was, now what do we do next? Most of us went back to our jobs and I did. And I think for me, it was understanding if I do this, it should always constantly be thrilling. And I had to really realize it doesn't have to be. And it's way more important, I've learned in these first couple of years, how important it is to just remain simple and not force myself to work 12, 15, 18 hours a day. That does not equate to good work. That's hard work, but it's not good most of the time.
Mm.
And that was also, and again, working at organizations, very long hours. And that's really not the type of culture that you want to have. You get burnt out. So in the beginning, it was me equating to like, I must do all of this tonight in order to feel good when I start again tomorrow as I'm building and scaling. I was like, that doesn't work for me. And I'm okay. It was a combination of like pressure and shame and then competition on myself. So I've learned to slow down that way. And then I think the other key piece too, like from a milestone perspective, is actually, I thought I'd want to have dozens of clients like on both sides. And I really don't. I want to be able to, the biggest flexibility as I'm getting older is I love my parents and my friends. And when we get older and we see where we're at, whether we're single or married and we have kids, and also how like that ecosystem of like being, if you're fortunate enough to have a great relationship with your parents and your family, how important it is, the luxury. Sure, I want a title, I want money. That's what I thought I wanted. But really what I want is the luxury of time back. So that way, when I figure out how to flex the types of customers I want, that's why I have two personas, right? It feeds the need that I have for my passions to help individuals and to help companies. But I've also learned I can put a really pretty big like governor or limitation on it of I don't really have to equate myself to working 60 hours a week that I'm successful. And really what it is how efficient I can be and respectful for myself and to my clients to deliver what they're asking for, be mindful of their time. And then the luxury that I get back is sure, I make money. I guess I have the title. That's not what I'm about. It's the fact that I'm getting so much time back. And that's really been like the switch that has flipped for me. It's always been there in my mind the last 10, 11 months. And then when you realize it, for me, it switches you from like, I've got to be in panic mode because I've got this title and I've got to keep going and grinding. That's not enjoyable, I think. I did that. It's more about the fact of I've got clients, revenues coming in, but the biggest piece is to have time for myself, to spend time with my parents and visit friends. That's the big piece as we get older is I also want to make certain I'm not so tied to my work that it's not my whole identity as I get closer to whatever retirement is. So that's the journey I've been on. So
I mean, time is such an incredibly valuable asset, the most valuable. It kind of leads into a question which you've already answered in some way, but I'll ask it. And it's super interesting when we ask this is with the benefit of hindsight, and if you had a time machine and you could go back 12 months, say, in this case, what would you do differently or what would you change?
I think that's a great question. I would ask myself to go back and realize that it's actually okay to fail a little bit more often, daily or weekly. I was for a while really seeking perfection, I think, in that social media LinkedIn space. And I put myself in this paralysis of not wanting to post. Like I must post every day. And that also really, it fully waterfalled out to other areas of the business and in my life. Even when I started my newsletter, it was like, I want it to be really long and all the things. And there's just no time for it. It's a waste of my time. I can always go back and visit it, just push publish, just get it done. And I think like that was the biggest piece that held me up because I thought I'm very fortunate. A lot of people know who I am, but there's still way more people who don't know who I am. And how is this going to come across? Like, am I really a thought leader? Could I do this? It was second guessing myself, and it's very natural. Everybody goes through that. And I wasn't hard on myself about it. I think it was more about getting it right. So it 12 months ago, it was, I needed to push myself to just clickety clack for maybe 5 minutes or 30 minutes tops, like on a post or a newsletter, check it for editorial, like just grammatical things, and then push, because that's how we learn. And then that's where we see what worked and what didn't. So that's what I would have done.
Sounds fantastic. And final question, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is not at all and 10 is extremely or total confidence, how confident are you that AI will create a measurable value in your business in the next 12 months?
Measurable value just for like the financial happiness, harmoniously, anything.
I think holistically, yeah.
For me, I'd give it an 8. And again, this goes back to, looking at the landscape and doing a little bit of scope of work to understand what exists, not have it in every part of my organization, but the parts, again, when you're a business of one, I need to like figure out how to understand what's out there in the market. So I've done my research. I know what's worth it, whether it's cost or no cost, and how it's going to allow me to free up my time in the way in which it can operate like I do. And it is in essence like a little bit of a clone of myself. So I can still keep my hands on the pulse of the entire business across all of my departments, even though it's just me. So I can work efficiently, still put out great quality work, be very passionate about it, and make a difference for people. So give it an 8.
Allison, many thanks. That's been an engaging and thought-provoking conversation, as I thought it would be when we spoke earlier. But
thanks, Jonny.
if the folks out there want to get in touch with you and Potentiate OS, where should they go? How have you website and socials?
Yeah, absolutely. Website, I'm at potentiateos.com. On the socials, I'm usually hanging out on LinkedIn, so I've got the company page, but there's also my personal page. That's where I post everything up on LinkedIn. I show up as Allison C. Ullrich, Ullrich. And yeah, those are the two main places that you can find me. And I've been fortunate to I've just done a couple publications back in April. So there's an article just about my background with International Business Times. And then I just recently did one 2 weeks ago with USA Today too. And, when I have this opportunity like I do with you, I'm very thankful to meet men and women who are hosting podcasts and allow me to speak at conferences. So I do those as well too when they come up. So I'm around.
Well, we're all very thankful of that. And thank you again for joining today. And thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you at the next edition of the AI Ripple Effect. So thank you, Alison.
Thank you, John.